Welcome to PENSARE Basketball Live. And the Toronto Raptors are bad. Are they a pretty bad team? They're tanking. They're not competitive. They didn't use their mid-level exception. They have a lot of misshapen and misfit pieces. And this is a team that is polarizing the fan base quite seriously. There's a lot of people that don't really want to watch this product. There are people who wonder if losing to the Orlando Magic without Franz Wagner, without Mo Wagner, without Paolo Banchero, without Jalen Suggs for most of the game, this is a team that you're supposed to be competing with. This is at least a team that going into this season, you thought you weren't that far behind. What does it say about you as a basketball team that you're so far behind this team? And I think that I want to explain the tank strategy in the best and most balanced way I can. First, I would like to apologize for my overall demeanor the last couple of days. I've been snappy, I've been a little bit aggressive, needlessly so. Needlessly so. This losing can take a real toll on people. I think losing my dog a couple of days ago or 3 days ago has really just it's been keeping me up a lot, and I haven't had a lot of patience. But I will say this: I'm going to be better for the rest of the season because I have realized that when people are where they are, you need to leave them where they are until they're ready to move. And I'm not trying to convince people who are unconvincible. What I'm trying to say is that I've always aimed that with Pensare Basketball, we could hopefully make better people through basketball, right? This is a philosophy that Brian's talked about a lot, making better people through basketball. Well, how about making better you through basketball? Let's take something that the Raptors are doing and apply it to our lives. So I want to talk about why the Toronto Raptors tank design is flawless. First of all, Toronto's perfect tank, right? I want to talk about forced development is greater than forced winning, right? Now, let me just make myself a little bit bigger and make this a little bit smaller. All in all, this just is actually quite simple, right? We have a bias in our minds to it's not a secret that winning a basketball game is actually just a matter of doing a lot of things right as opposed to doing a lot of things wrong. You turn the ball over a lot, you miss a lot of shots, you take a lot of selfish threes, you're probably going to lose the game. You get back in transition, you guard your man, you do a good job guarding the perimeter, you do a good job boarding, you do a good job taking care of the ball, you're probably going to win a lot of games. So it's difficult at times to do a lot of good things and then get bad results. It's really difficult, actually. And if you recall, coming into this season, I thought this team was too good to tank. I thought there was a real problem with this team that, hey, you got Jakob Poeltl, you got IQ, you got RJ, you got Scottie, you got Grady. There's too much here. You got Bruce Brown, you got Kelly Olynyk. Well, I certainly didn't see all the injuries coming. I certainly didn't see this MIG defense. I certainly did not see the misshapen lineups. I didn't see Davion Mitchell playing this big a part. And that's when you start to see the ultimate tank design, right? And what this team is trying to do. Now, another thing that I think is worth talking about is that the Raptors have forced winning before. If you'll understand, under Nick Nurse, there was a lot of forced winning. They tried to spam the possession game. They played starters into the ground. That's forced winning. That was trying to force winning. For 2 years under Nick Nurse, you didn't have a single season as bad as the one you're having right now. Nick Nurse was never with the Raptors at any point in his tenure 10 games, 15 games under 500. I mean, there was a stretch where I mean he might have been 10 games under 500 when the Raptors traded for Jakob Poeltl, but they weren't 10 games under 500 for long. They finished the season 41-41. And you realize that with the Raptors under Nick Nurse, there was a lot of forced winning. Winning that like you're burning OG into the ground, you're running Scottie into the ground, you're running these crazy aggressive schemes in order to buy more possessions because the players you have are not efficient enough with the positions that they had, right? What is going on here? Raptors hiring Sid Sixero? I certainly hope not. What? As what? Oh Lord, please God help me. No, I really I would hate to see that. So what? I don't understand this at all. Sorry. I'm just gonna not I'm gonna try not to pay too much attention to the chat if you don't mind, because y'all bugging right now. Where was I? Right. So under Nick Nurse, you had a lot of forced winning. Right now, you have a lot of forced development. And I prefer forced development over forced winning. what would Force development under Nick Nurse have looked like? It would have looked like cutting Fred VanVleet's minutes and seeing what Malachi Flynn and Delano Banton could have done. It would have been experimenting a little bit more with Scottie Barnes's on-ball creation, even if it costs you a few minutes. It would have been trying to expand your offensive focus to passing a little bit more, even if it meant a few more turnovers, because that's good for basketball. At some point, if you want to win a championship, you're going to have to be a team that can read a double. You're going to have to be a team that moves the ball and is a little less predictable. This style of basketball, of putting the basketball in Pascal and Fred's hands and allowing them to go one-on-one just because it won you the possessions and at least you got a shot, even if it was a super low quality shot, is not a style that is going to win you games in the playoffs. I hope Nick Nurse knew that. But it was a style that gets players paid. And it got Pascal paid. It got Fred paid. So it accomplished what it was supposed to do. But now those players are gone and we're left with nothing. So was it really a great strategy or was it really selfish? I think it was really selfish. There are 100 different ways to lose a basketball game, right? I think we can all agree that if you've ever played a basketball game, there are certain games that you've lost where you just don't rebound well. There are certain games where you don't shoot well. There's certain games where you turn the ball over a lot. There's a certain game where you play well enough to lose. Sorry, you play well enough to win, and you just lose at the buzzer because there's a late communication or the other team just gets super hot. Sometimes it's not even what you do, it's what the other team does. Sometimes it's, a lot of failed rotation. Sometimes a bench player comes off the bench and, scores 30 points. Sometimes a non-shooter goes off like PJ Washington against the OKC Thunder. The point is, basketball is a game of so many variables. There are a lot of different ways to lose a basketball game. And one of those ways to lose a basketball game is to put a whole bunch of people together who don't like to be together. If you'll understand, the Toronto Raptors under Nick Nurse, the last season under Nick Nurse, were a 41-win team, but they probably should have been a lot closer to 46 or 47 wins. They underperformed significantly because they didn't communicate, because they didn't take efficient shots, because they were dead tired, and largely because I don't think that team was very connected at all, defensively or offensively. And you need that. You need that. Sometimes you can lose a game almost by design. You can put a non-rim protector in a position to protect the rim over and over and over. And that's exactly what we're doing. Now we play Kelly and Yak. Have you noticed that the Raptors defense has been abysmal with Kelly Olynyk back in the lineup? Yeah, it's not because Kelly's a terrible defender. He's terrible at defending the way they're asking him to defend. Kelly has been a competent defender for the vast majority of his career. He's definitely didn't walk into Toronto as a non-defender, but now put in a position where he's having to cover up for this pressure defense, this high pickup point, he's totally lost. And it's not necessarily his fault or Darko's fault or anyone's fault. It's by design, right? There are a lot of different ways to lose a basketball game, but it's very difficult to lose basketball games with winning players. What are winning players? Winning players are the players who care about details. Winning players are the guys who hustle, get back. They care about defense. They share the basketball. The players who do the right things on the basketball court, players like Scottie Barnes, players like Jamal Shed, players like Jonathan Mobo, Grady Dick, Emmanuel Quickley, these guys have won their whole lives, man. They have been winning players forever. Jakob Poeltl is a winning player for all intents and purposes. If a coach watches Jakob Poeltl, they're like, this guy does a lot of good things. There's not Jordan Poole out there. This is not, empty calories, Bones Highland out there jacking up shots and not guarding anybody. This is not the Anthony Simon special where it's just all talent. These are winning players, but they're losing. And that's hard to do. It's really hard to do. Now, when we talk about maximum flexibility to navigate the new CBA as a little bit of a sidebar, the Toronto Raptors don't have a lot of bad contracts on their books. I mean, you might argue that Emmanuel Quickley could turn into a bad contract if he sustains a few injuries, but I really don't think that they have a lot of bad contracts on their books, right? The bloated contracts are short-term. Kelly Olynyk, 2 years, $25 million. Not a great contract, but movable, $26 million. Chris Boucher expiring, Bruce Brown expiring. And what you're going to replace all of these contracts with pretty much next year is Scottie Barnes jumping up to his max extension, plus the top 6 to top 7 pick that's coming in. And honestly, I don't think you're going to lose much in that exchange. You're probably also going to have a little bit of room within that trade-off to, given how much Bruce Brown and Chris Boucher pretty much make the difference between Scottie Barnes and not Scottie Barnes. And I could argue right now, Bruce Brown and Chris Boucher have gotten you an extra win at this point. So what are you really losing? I think you'll have the flexibility to maybe take on about 20 to $25 million, because you can operate a little bit closer to the luxury tax line next year when you're trying to be competitive, and you can actually take on a player who helps you a little bit more. Maybe that player is a player like an Andrew Wiggins. Maybe it's someone like DeAndre Hunter. Maybe it's someone like Walker Kessler. Maybe it's someone, I don't know. I don't know who that player will be. But what I do know is that Grady is on a rookie contract for a few more years, right? At least a couple more years. He's gonna be dirt cheap. Jacoby's on a rookie contract for 3 more years after this year. He's gonna be dirt cheap. I have a feeling these two are gonna be like replacement level or above players next year. That's a lot of really good assets to have on the cheap. Jacoby is super cheap right now. Jonathan Mobo is super cheap. Ulrich, who had one of his best games of the year for the Raptors 905, is dirt cheap. Jamison Battle, dirt cheap. You have a lot of dirt cheap players. They're not great players. Jonathan Mobo, these are not great players. There's no one on this list is inspiring the same amount of confidence as, even a Jaime Jaquez at this point. But they could be better. They could be better than that Jaime Jaquez, Brandon Pajinski mold, and they're young. They're young. For the vast majority of these players are either young or late developers or late bloomers. And I think that you'll probably get some value on the back end of these deals. And the most important thing about flexibility is you can actually help other teams that don't have a lot of flexibility. You can help teams that are a little bit capped out. You can be the team that is the third team in a trade, and you can take back some assets in order to park some cap space. So I think the Raptors have positioned themselves pretty well going into the summer, but also right now going into this season, into the trade deadline. I think the Raptors could be, not necessarily buyers at the trade deadline, but they could be a team that takes on a salary because they have the room to do so. They can take on an extra 12, $13 million without really killing themselves here. They can take on an extra year, send away Bruce Brown, take on an extra year, and then work with that expiring this summer, provided it is that I don't know who you're talking to, but I wish I had really stuck to I wish I'd stuck to my guns about, not paying attention to the chat. So I think that, yeah. Okay, let's move on from that. Andrew Wiggins would be helpful. Super helpful. Now let's talk about redefining winning on and off the court. Now, I think that one of the things that is lost in this concept of development is you assume that everything you see is everything that's happening, and that's just not true. And Darko has alluded to that several times, that I wish you guys could see the play groups. I wish you could see the film sessions. I wish you could see the growth that these kids are having. Look, Chet Holmgren grew tremendously from his 1 year at Gonzaga to his second year in the NBA, and he didn't play a single game, not one game, but he grew tremendously. He grew over the summer. The Raptors used this past summer to get these players better. Emmanuel Quickley is better, whether he's shown it this year or not. He is a better player. RJ is a better player. Ochai is a better player. Now, there's only so much better you can get with the individuals before it starts showing up on the team, right? And that's where I was a little bit worried with all the development that the Raptors were doing, because I'm so used to the Raptors kind of having like a backfire. Like if you notice, like we the North, we were trying to tank and then we just ended up being competitive. And I was like, oh my God, I hope this doesn't happen, because what's at stake here with this top 5 pick is a lot. I'm really hoping this team doesn't just accidentally be good. And I'm actually pretty impressed with how they're doing it. And how they're doing it is actually pretty special. So as you may or may not know, most NBA teams, most veteran teams don't practice a lot during the season. The Raptors practice a lot. They practice a lot. They do a lot of work. It's between, whether that means Jamal Shed is playing 2 games in a single day, whether that means, Jamison Battle's playing 2 games in a single day, whether that means they're running like a really long practice, whether that means they're doing work in the weight room. They're keeping these players pretty exhausted, right? They're keeping these players pretty gassed. And overall, it's like there's no rest, right? Even the summer. Most NBA players take at least a few months off in the summer. When's the last time Scottie Barnes has taken a few months off ever? He's either rehabbing or he's working. And this constant sort of fatigue on your body, it doesn't allow you to ever feel fresh, right? If you look at a player like Damian Lillard, if there's 2 games off, he's off. He's not working 3 hours in practice. He's doing light shoot around and work like that. So when you take a look at the whole 24 hours that every player has, right? There's film study, there's dinners, there's meetings, there's coaches meetings that players are sometimes invited into. There's scouting sessions. There's pregame warm-ups. There's shooting drills. There's all the play groups that the Raptors do, the 3-on-3 work that they do. All of this stuff is contributing to the development of these players. Now, if you're going to put Grady in a position to be going against what he does well, that's not necessarily going to yield a lot of winning on the court. And this is when I say, the other important thing, this is sort of like, oops, hold on. Let's hang on one sec. So reshaping the philosophy and culture and then swapping out the parts. One of the biggest challenges when Darko Rakovic took over for the Toronto Raptors was changing out this culture of what we called selfishness, right? This culture of individualism, this culture of hunting your own shot and moving it away from that. And then, trying to create a more aesthetically pleasing style of basketball. Now, in the end, it doesn't really matter how aesthetically pleasing your basketball style is. If the ball doesn't go in and you don't defend, it doesn't really matter what you're trying to do. The average fan is still going to crucify you because you're losing games, right? But you need to care. You need to care about how open these shots are. You need to care about how evolved the methodology and the theory is, because in the end, the theory is what carries you through, right? You can do something extremely unevolved very, very well, but there's an upper limit to it, right? There's an upper limit. You're going to hit a wall at some point with a team that is going to scheme you out, and that's generally what happens in the playoffs. You get exposed, right? So you're not trying to create a basketball team, you're trying to create great basketball players, right? And that's the important thing here. You're trying to create great individual basketball players. You will work on creating a great team from those great individual basketball players once you have the right pieces in place that actually fit together. Right now, when you consider something as simple as an RJ Barrett drive or a Scottie Barnes drive, okay, so let's say we're going to drive from the top of the key into the congested paint. Well, the paint is naturally congested because you are almost always playing a non-shooter, whether that be Jonathan Mobo standing down there, whether that be Jakob Pertl, whether it be Bruno Fernando, whoever it be, right? Unless Kelly Olynyk is on the floor as a lone big, you're probably playing something where the paint is a little bit congested. And if RJ Barrett is going to drive on the same side of the floor that Davion Mitchell and Jamal Shadd are fanning out to the wing and above the break, well, now RJ is going to collapse for defenders, but he's going to have no options to kick out to. He's either going to have a center who's not open because they're taking it away. He's going to have shooters who are wide open, but he knows it's not a great option to pass to them because they're not going to make the shot. And so you're just creating like a very complicated offense. Now, what happens if you exchange Davion Mitchell with Malik Beasley? The whole play changes. How expensive is Malik Beasley? Not that expensive. Not that expensive at all. Players like Dorian Finney-Smith, Malik Beasley, these are the players you need to swap in to some of these positions. Now, those players are relatively inexpensive. They're not hard to find. You're not missing, of course, everyone would love, a Tyrese Maxey, but that's not exactly what you're missing right now. What you're missing is two competent NBA level wings. Andrew Wiggins and Dorian Finney-Smith would completely change this team into like a 48-win team overnight. And that's not that hard to get. See, that's the important thing here. It's not that hard to get, right? We're not talking about you need to go out there and you need to get Steph Curry and Chet Holmgren. Like, it's not that hard to get. A replacement level backup big who can protect the paint and block some shots, that's not that hard to get. A decent backup point guard who doesn't turn the ball over and can shoot at a respectable clip, 37%. How hard is that to get? Tyus Jones, he was a minimum player. Gary Trent Jr., DeLon Wright. I mean, my God, these players are not hard to get. But it's important to realize that the philosophy and the culture, right, that you're building for the players you want to stay, not the ones you want to leave. It doesn't matter. Chris Boucher is not going to be on this team next year. I could almost write that in blood. He's not going to be on this team next year, right? There's certain players who are not going to be here. Bruce Brown, probably not going to be here. These players are sort of just the background. They're the background noise. But at some point, Scottie Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, whoever you think is going to be here, they're going to have to then what, readjust to playing this way? They're already used to playing this way. Now you just get pieces that fit a little bit better. And suddenly everything that you think works in theory works in practice because all of those driving angles, like again, Jacoby Walter driving into the paint right now, it doesn't look pretty. The efficiency is not great. What happens when you add one more shooter to the court to space to add a little bit more space to it, and you add 15 pounds of muscle over the next 12 months to his frame so that he can actually take contact better? Well, suddenly your 38% becomes 46%, and basketball is just a game of inches, right? So you make 3 or 4 swaps like that, and suddenly you're in all these games. In the first 29 games that the Raptors played this year, only 8 were losses by more than 10. So you already have some theory that you're close. You're just not finishing these games. You're up 6 against Denver with a minute to go. Denver's going to be a playoff team this year. You go out and you beat Sacramento. They're a play-in team. Granted, they were struggling. You go out and beat Minnesota. You go out and beat, Indiana. You've beat teams, and then you've lost to the Charlottes and a depleted Orlando team. I don't know what necessarily you want to hone in on. If you want to hone everything on the last 4 or 5 games, it's been bad. It's been really bad. The Raptors have been really terrible the last basically a week and a half. It's been a week and a half to 2 weeks. The Raptors have been awful. But if you take everything before that, you realize this team is not that far. That was the whole narrative. This team is not that far. One loss to Orlando like this, couple blowouts, and suddenly people are panicking. It's like, oh my God. But one thing that is consistent about this team, focus on what has been consistent the whole way through. We're talking since Darko took over till now. The vibes have been immaculate. Whoever comes into this system next year, whether that be a free agent, whether that be a rookie, whether that be multiple rookies, because you have the Portland pick plus your own pick, those players are going to be met with that enthusiasm and that culture and that standard of being from the get-go. And that is very, very important. Now you're just swapping out parts. You're swapping out your Bruce Brown for your Dorian Finney-Smith. How big a swap is that? Bruce Brown doesn't necessarily fit on this team. Dorian Finney-Smith would. Jay Crowder might. Taurean Prince might. One of those players might. And I think it's not that hard to get. I think one of the most underrated parts of losing by design is that losing exposes character. When you lose, things happen. People turn bitter. People stop trying. People start pointing fingers. People become a little bit selfish, right? It tends to happen whenever you see a team down by like 12, 13, 14 points, you suddenly start seeing guys go one-on-one. I'm not necessarily even saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it tends to be that when players are down, you start to see who really cares about defense. I'll tell you who I've seen really cares. Jamal Shed, Jamison Battle. These are 2 guys that I've seen really care about the process and just about being professional basketball players. I think they've earned their keep on this team next year. I would put it. I would say it's on very, very good authority that those 2 players are going to be here. I'll tell you another guy who cares a lot, right? Jacoby Walter. Those are 3 of your younger players. Ulrich, he cares. I was talking to somebody who's very, very close to the Raptors 905, and they were just talking about just what a progression he has been from what they saw last night to what they saw at the beginning of the year. They're like, man, this guy is relentless. He works so hard. Like he's a sponge. He's just listening. Man, you have something good here. And you have all these little pieces, and none of them are really contributing to winning right now. But it's like, at what point will they? Right? But they have no reason. They have nothing to fight for other than professionalism at this point, right? If you're thinking about it, like you're not fighting for the playoffs, you're not fighting for a championship, you're not playing for the NBA Cup. What are you working for? Right? What are you working for? You're working for your contract, you're working for professionalism, you're working for doing the right things on the basketball court. And I think that, what we have seen is that we have guys who are continuing to stay positive through negative outcomes. They're continuing to stay positive. So if you can stay positive through negative outcomes, I'll assume that you can stay positive through positive outcomes, right? What happened when the Raptors were losing with Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam? Suddenly we saw a lot of finger pointing. We saw an erosion of culture. We saw a lot of, media stuff. It was just not very good. It was not fun to be around. And people kept saying winning will solve everything. Winning solves everything. Well, in order to know whether I want to win with you, first I might have to lose a little bit with you and find out who you actually are. So I think that losing is underrated, and I think that it exposes character. The casting against type thing, which is what Utah and Toronto are doing, I've covered this multiple times on this channel, that I believe that the Raptors are deliberately putting players into positions to fail so that they can fail forward. There's a concept I believe in called failing forward. You don't do the minimum weight that feels comfortable. You actually do the weight that feels uncomfortable until muscle failure, right? That's how you build muscle. Like, ask anybody. You're not going to build muscle if you lift 20 pounds every single day for 3 years. You're not going to build muscle like that. You're going to just tone up. You got to, at some point, you got to go to 25, and you got to go to 30, you got to go to 35. So if I know you can do 35 and I hand you 40, yeah, you're going to struggle. But if I know you can do 35 and I hand you 60, you're not going to move. And I think that that's sort of the idea here, is to load them up, but not completely break their confidence, right? So Grady can handle the ball a little bit. Wait till you see Grady and Jacoby initiating possessions. That's going to be really fun, and people are going to lose their minds, right? I am really, really happy with the process of what the Raptors are doing specifically, because I see a lot of parallels between what the Raptors are doing, what the Utah Jazz are doing. Lauri Markkanen has not been in positions to succeed a lot this year. I mean, he's doing a lot of stuff that feels kind of uncomfortable for him, but they're trying to round him out into a more complete basketball player. And it's a sort of secret genius tanking strategy, because it's not blatantly obvious. You're not like throwing games. You're not like not trying on defense or not getting back. It's not like the Raptors are not trying on defense. They're miscommunicating defensively. They're ineffective defensively, but you can't accuse them of not trying. I mean, maybe you can accuse RJ Barrett of not trying, I think, as James Welsh alluded to in a couple of comments ago. I think he said, where was it? Where was it? Where was it? Yeah, RJ does not give a darn about defense. I mean, it's not that he doesn't give a darn, but certainly his motor on that end has been questionable. And, you know, it's been spotty for a lot of players. Let's be real. You know, Jakob protecting the paint, Scottie on the closeout sometimes. There are certain box outs that players are missing. Grady on his rotations has been piss poor. You know, there's been a lot of miscues. But again, like, you're playing super fast. The Raptors are 7th in the league in pace right now. So everything you're doing is fast, fast, fast. You're doing it up and down, right? If you're a team that lacks great decision makers across the board, you don't want to be playing this fast. You play this fast when Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam are on your team, and you have a veteran-laden team that's really great at taking care of the basketball, right? Like, you don't do this with a whole bunch of rookies. You're farming for turnovers at this point. But the more you do it, the more you're going to get faster at it, right? The more you have RJ Barrett initiating possessions. I mean, if I had told a Knicks fan prior to this year that the Raptors are going to be running RJ Barrett at point guard, they'd be like, y'all lost your minds, you know? Knicks fans don't even buy Emmanuel Quickly as a pure point guard. I mean, the Raptors, media space has been calling Emmanuel Quickly a pure point guard. He's not, but he's working into it, right? All of these players are working into something different, right? Even Jakob Pertl, it's like the imagination has said, I see what you're at. I see what you do well. I know that you like to shoot from there. We're going to force you to shoot from somewhere else. Scottie showed that he could shoot from the corners last year. What's he not doing this year? Shooting from the corners. He just cut out the short corner shooting, right? So that's the important thing. It's rounding out the skill set so that you have complete basketball players. I always say this thing when I was making my films, which was, I'm not trying to make great films. I'm trying to make a great filmmaker. And I feel the Raptors have a very, very similar philosophy to it. They're not trying to make a great basketball team. They're trying to make great basketball players. And it's a completely different philosophy, right? Okay. Pivoting is not hard. Most people have this idea that you can't go from like 26 wins to 48 wins, but teams do it. Teams do it all the time. I mean, those are what Coach of the Year awards are for, those big, big turnarounds. But the truth is that the pivot comes, and sometimes it comes very quickly. You did not see the OKC Thunder as a title favorite 3 years ago. I'll guarantee you that, right? You just didn't see it. And look at them today, right? Even without Chet Holmgren for most of the season so far, they have massively exceeded expectations. I would argue they're the best team in the East. What did you see from San Antonio last year that told you they were going to be a play-in team or a playoff team this year because they just beat the Denver Nuggets last night. They have beat a lot of good teams this year. They are playing great competitive basketball. What did you see? You think Chris Paul, a 40-year-old Chris Paul at point guard, and a rookie named Stephon Castle, who hasn't really analytically, he's been like what negative 5 boxes minus, and Harrison Barnes, you think that's the big difference? Yeah, Harrison Barnes is a huge difference. And that's the point. Wemby's growth has been minimal, like overall, year over year. Wemby was already this great player at the end of last season. I'm not arguing he's not a better player. I'm just saying from where they were yesterday, from where they were last season to where they are now is a matter of just swapping a few pieces. About getting Devin Vassell healthy. Devin Vassell's barely been healthy. It's been about constructing a slightly more coherent offense. It's been about getting guys like Harrison Barnes, Chris Paul. You know how easy it would have been for the Raptors to get Harrison Barnes and Chris Paul? If the Raptors had said, "Hey, Chris Paul, come be our starting point guard," you think he wouldn't have said yes? He just wanted to play. He just wanted to hoop. Harrison Barnes is a perfectly fine player. Jeremy Sohan has been good. And what was Jeremy Sohan last year? He was an oversized point guard who was playing against type. So pivoting is not hard. It's just a matter of finding a couple of veterans who come in, your Chuck Hayes, your Gravis Vasquez, your John Salmons, right? Just finding those guys to come in. Youth never wins in the NBA. Almost never. You're not going to be playing 5 rookies next year. That much I'll guarantee you. Even these 5 rookies that you have on your roster, probably one of them is going to be gone, maybe 2, right? You might trade one, you might just let one go. I don't know. I think they've all been really, really interesting, but it'll be interesting to see what the Raptors do with that. But when you get older with your roster, as the Pistons are finding out this year, you think the Pistons are so much better this year because Cade's so much better this year? No, it's not because Cade is so much better this year. It's because you got guys. You got guys like Malik Beasley. You've got guys like, Tobias Harris, who are just proven professionals. And these proven professionals, these experienced players like your Harrison Barnes, your Tobias Harrises, et cetera, they just contribute to winning. Now, you would assume that the Raptors have too many of these types of players to keep losing. And I agreed with you. Coming into this year, I was like, there's no way you can have guys like Kelly Olynyk, Bruce Brown, Jakob Poeltl, et cetera. But what I didn't realize is if you play them with 2 or 3 rookies at all times, yes, you can lose. If you play them with Davion Mitchell, Jamal Shed, and Jacoby Walter, yeah, you can lose. Constructing every lineup, that's exactly it, right? Like, it does help. JJ1 saying Cade going off right now. Do you mean like literally like right now? Now I'm almost curious. Oh, wow. Minnesota is actually losing. "20 points. Nice. Cool. My point is that when you decide to pivot as an organization towards winning, it won't be as difficult as you think. And it's not going to require, and I mean, obviously, a top 5 pick that actually plays well and goes out and wins rookie of the year, like a Cooper Flag, who's on this graphic, or a Dylan Harper, players who are considerably better than guys like Bilal Coulibaly and guys like Asar Thompson, etc. Having someone like that, I mean, that can really, really shift your progression. But please understand, Cooper, Scottie, these are very rare players. Most rookies not going to help you win. And if you do fall back in the draft a little bit, get someone like Kaman Malawak or Kaman Malawach or a VJ Edgecombe or something like that, don't expect a huge, huge progression in terms of winning next year because of that player. But do expect a huge progression in terms of how much better Grady is, how much better RJ is, how much better Scottie is. And that, I think, cumulatively, you can bridge up like 10 to 12 wins right there, just from internal growth and organizational focus towards winning and not having all these injuries. I think you can shore up like 15 wins right there. Now swap out some personnel, you get 20 wins, and then suddenly you're a 42 win team. I think that's pretty much how it will go. But again, you didn't have to gut your roster. I wanted us to gut our roster, or I wanted us to go in, right? Overall, right now, the wins and losses are distractions. People are getting way too caught up in the win-loss record, 13-game losing streak, 11-game losing streak, 40-point loss, 50-point loss. These things are not relevant to me at all. I mean, obviously, you don't want to lose by 50. You don't. But you're playing a team like, even yesterday, you don't want to lose to the Orlando Magic. Did the Orlando Magic shoot like way better than you were expecting them to? Did they shoot better than they were expecting to? Did they just have a miracle night from the field? Sure. Did the Raptors also miscommunicate a lot of their coverages and fuck up and, pretty much leave the Magic open a lot and got them a lot of confidence? And now Corey Joseph's going and Jalen Suggs is going and Tristan Da Silva's going. They're all going. Sure. Right. So I think that overall, this process is like you are sort of trained to root for wins. And I'm not asking you to root for losses. Please understand. I'm not asking you to root for wins or losses. What I'm saying is, in the end, if a player has 24 hours in a day and they have 48 hours in a 72 hours in a 3-day span, and they play one game, that one game is like 30 minutes, 30 minutes or 20 minutes of their life during that 72 hours. What I'm asking you to think about is what happens the other 72 hours? Are they picking up the good habits? Are they learning how to be a professional? I hate to make it sound like we're in like some sort of training school, but that's effectively what the Raptors are right now. They're a training school for basketball players, right? They're taking a very college approach. This is something Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster have said multiple times. We're like a college team. They're taking a very college approach, right? And in order to do that, you have to get a lot of buy-in from your players, right? You have to get a lot of buy-in from your players because you're asking them to make themselves look bad. You're asking them to be on a losing team and be okay with it, smile and be okay with it, even as the media is trashing them, fans are trashing them. Their agents are probably worrying, like, oh my God, what's the next contract going to look like? You've managed to keep players like Bruce Brown and, Chris Boucher, who have, serious stakes on the line in terms of, contract stuff. You've managed to keep them somewhat satisfied, right? They're not like bitching. We're not hearing like a lot of complaints and moaning from them. They've been professionals about the whole thing. Chris Boucher has been, dropping in and out of the rotation. We haven't heard any peeps from him, saying like, hey, I'm unhappy, I want out, etc. So, overall, the process has been really encouraging. It's been amazing to see this team constructed as I believe it is to win around 36 to 42 games. And due to injuries, weird lineups, strange defensive principles, tired legs, overworking players in practice, etc., somehow they have cumulatively put themselves on pace for like 20 wins. And I don't know what the next, 11 games are going to hold for the Toronto Raptors. Have no idea. But I have a streaking suspicion that this team is not going to be good. I have a streaking suspicion that this team is probably going to finish the season with like 21 to 22 wins, even with all those Portlands and Washingtons and Charlottes later on. And I think that that's going to net them at least a top 6 pick. Now, what happens in the draft? It's not boom or bust. It's not, oh my God, we don't get Cooper Flag, it's over. I hope you're not going into the draft with that mentality. It'd be great to get Cooper Flag, but at best, you can guarantee yourself 14%. Would you bet your life saving on 14% of anything? You wouldn't. You wouldn't. I wouldn't. Nobody would. It's a drop in the hat. Like it's a, we're talking 3 out of 20. 3 out of 20. So at best, the number one pick. So let's just say you gut it out. Now let's just say if you had taken the opinion of certain people to say, hey, trade Yak, trade RJ, trade IQ, trade everybody. Sit Scotty for a whole year. What are you doing? You are at best guaranteeing yourself a 14% chance. A 14% chance. Depending on how you see this next year's draft, if you see it as a 2 to 3 player draft, there's nothing you can do to guarantee yourself one of those 3 players. Zero. You can't be a 6-win team and guarantee yourself Cooper Flag. That's just how the NBA has structured the draft odds. It used to be that you could pretty much guarantee yourself like a top 4 pick. Now you can at best guarantee yourself a top 5 pick. And in order to guarantee yourself a top 5 pick, you have to be Detroit Pistons 2023, 2024 levels of bad. The Raptors were never willing to do that. The Raptors are card counters. The Raptors are card counters at a Vegas table, and they're hedging all their bets. Okay. They do not want to lose this year of Scottie reps in game. I talked to Jacoby Walters' trainer some months back. Some of y'all caught it, some of you didn't. But it was a video, and we were talking about unpredictable versus predictable movements, right? We were talking about the importance of game, right? Like game reps. And the Raptors are getting all of their players game reps. They're not getting them all together. They're not getting, we haven't seen the full roster once. We finally get Emmanuel quickly back. No, boom, RJ Barrett, illness, right? You finally get Emmanuel quickly back, boom, you lose this guy. You get RJ back, you lose Scottie. Like it's just boom, boom, boom. It's like there's always one piece that's always out. Now, when you finally do get this group back, you're facing Milwaukee at home, and then you got a tough road stretch. So it's like great, you know what I mean? Like, could we have had an easy win against Charlotte with this entire group together? I think that's why yesterday's loss is so devastating for people, because they're like, oh my god, like couldn't we have won that? And it's like you might have been able to win that, but you didn't play Chris Boucher. So for all intents and purposes, like you didn't play Chris Boucher, Jamison Battle, and Jonathan Mobo. I got news for you. None of those players, Jonathan Mobo, Chris Boucher, Jamison Battle, have been one of the worst players on your roster. None of them. They've actually been 3 of your top 9 players on your roster, per the analytics. RJ Barrett has easily been one of the top 9 players on your roster. So you were still without 4 pieces. Do you understand what I'm saying? Even when you get healthy, even for the namesake, you're healthy. You're not healthy because you won't even play the lineup combinations that could possibly help you. You're just constantly shuffling the deck. It's like you've created this Rolodex of lineups that can't win, and you're putting them together, and you're isolating the development of 2 to 3 players for every one of those lineups. Like, this is going to be the lineup where we're going to work on Jacoby Walters cuts. This is going to be the lineup where we're working on Grady catch and shoots. This is the lineup where we're working on Scottie initiation. And it's just constantly like this, right? So that's the important part. Those little wins within the season, the improvement at the free throw line, the improvement with the ball handling, the improvement on the shot generation, the improvement in RJ Barrett's decision making, those are the wins. The improvement on Grady's defense, if he ever gets better defensively, that's the win. The win against Orlando in January, that's not the win. So that's what I'm trying to say, is like try to rehone your brain away from thinking about wins and losses on the record book and start thinking about wins and losses. And this is what I have to say: the sum of all the pieces, misfits and swaps. So yesterday you saw the Orlando Magic, a winning team, go out without a lot of pieces and just win. Cole Anthony, Tristan da Silva, Caleb Houston, right? Jonathan Isaac. These are players, KCP. I know that our brains are sort of trained to think about Paolo, Franz, but they're not missing Paolo and Franz the way you think they're missing Paolo and Franz. Put it like this. I mean, I wish I could express this as an equation, because it'd probably be a lot easier to sort of just draw this out. But I want you to think about it like this. Cole Anthony would definitively, every one of those players that I just mentioned would be a rotation player for you. Can we agree on that? KCP would be a starter for you. Tristan Silva is probably a starter for you, or at least a high-level rotation player. If Jacoby Walter is a starter or occasional starter for you, Tristan Da Silva would start for you as well. Cole Anthony is a backup guard for namesake, but he has put up huge performances. He is a scoring guard. He is leaps and bounds ahead right now of Davion Mitchell and Jamal Shed. And ironically, I made a big fuss about Raptors Republic, talking about Davion Mitchell's extension. And one of the biggest reasons for that is look at Cole Anthony's extension. And I don't think that Davion Mitchell is anywhere close to the player Cole Anthony is. You look at a guy like Jonathan Isaac. Are you telling me Jonathan Isaac wouldn't step onto the Raptors right away and be their best option as a starting center? 100% he would. So what is the gap between a Jonathan Isaac and a Jakob Poeltl? It's not a huge gap. The Magic are a deep team. Just because they're missing their top guys, it doesn't mean their secondary guys aren't better than your primary guys. And that might be a really depressing thought for some people. It might be. But games are not won because of your 11th guy. Seasons are won because of your 11th guy. But individual games are won because of your top 8 to top 9 rotation. And that's what you need to worry about if you're the Toronto Raptors. How many of your players would be rotation players on their team is a far more relevant question. And I think that's one part of the equation. The second part of the equation that I would say is when you're a winning team, you tend to win more. I don't know how to explain that, but there's like an organizational, institutional knowledge of how to win basketball games. Like you have an identification that we are a winning team. So we have winning habits. We have a winning identity. We walk into games expecting to win basketball games. Whereas the Raptors are a losing team. It doesn't mean that last night if you swap Cole Anthony for Emmanuel Quickly that the Magic would lose. It doesn't mean if you swap Scottie Barnes for Tristan da Silva that the Magic would lose. The Magic would win by much more if they had Scottie and Emmanuel Quickly. Scottie and Emmanuel Quickly would be starters probably for the Orlando Magic. But the difference here is that from a coaching perspective, everything they have done is designed to win basketball games. From their schemes to their offense to their defense, everything is designed to win basketball games. They're not worried about Jet Howard's development, Anthony Black's development. I mean, I'm sure they're developing them, but that's not the organizational focus. The organizational focus is to get as deep as possible in the playoffs with Paolo and Franz. And they're trying to hold the fort down while those guys are back or when those guys come back. That is the organizational focus of the Orlando Magic. That's the organizational focus of Jamal Mosley. That's the organizational focus of Jeff Weltman. That's what they're trying to do. Okay. They're trying to win basketball games. And the Raptors are not really trying to win basketball games. And that sounds like really repetitive and weird to say, but it's like it's not what they're trying to do. And so just because you lost the game, I think most fans think that must mean that Scottie Barnes and Emmanuel Quickly are not better than Cole Anthony and Tristan da Silva. And the truth is, they are significantly better than those players. How do I know this? Because the Orlando Magic wanted both these players. The Magic were dying to draft Scottie at number 5. The Magic were one of the leading competing offers for Emmanuel Quickly services if the Raptors hadn't ponied up to pay him. Okay? So in the end, yeah, there's a lot of players on that team. Wendell Carter, Goga Bitadze. You telling me there's a gap between Kelly Olynyk and those two players? I would say Kelly's worse. Am I wrong? I would say Kelly is at least on par or worse. Chris Boucher. I mean, you just playing like this weird. The Raptors rotation from 6 through 11 is so bad. But what would a Harrison Barnes and an Andrew Wiggins do to that rotation is it would completely smooth it out. What another summer of development would do what another summer of development would do would be to sort of flatten out that rotation, thin out some of the redundant pieces, and you would just win basketball games. And then, of course, it is a matter of learning how to win basketball games together. It's about not choking away those 2-point losses over and over. But I think that the Raptors are a lot closer than people think they are, man. I really do. And I hope that people can see that. And I hope that people don't spend the next 8 months, in misery and perpetual misery until, the season starts and the Raptors sort of prove it wrong. Because actually the next season is almost 10 months away. So the chances are that there's going to be a lot of pain over the next 10 months, and it's going to be a lot of unnecessary pain if you are choosing to be in pain right now. I don't think you should be in pain at all. Rank Scrub saying, is Kaman Malawach our top center target? Who else? Well, I'm not really sure who else in the draft really speaks to me as a center prospect in the top 8 to top 9. I think there's plenty of really, really interesting prospects more in the teens and the late 20s, early second round. I wonder if the Raptors would use their first pick, which I would presume is a top 6 to top 7 pick based on how the odds are sitting right now. I wonder if they would use that pick. I mean, again, you could be the 5th worst team and end up with a 9th pick. Does that reality scare you? There's nothing you can't do anything about it. You could also be the 12th worst team, bounced in the play-in, and then get Cooper Flag. Like, I mean, that's the whole thing. They just they de-incentivize lottery, so you can't put all your hopes on the lottery. You can't put all your hopes on Cooper Flag, Ace Bailey, Yegor, whatever. You just can't. You have to. And again, like what I was saying earlier about how the Raptors view this draft, I don't know. But if they view it as a top 5, like if they think there are 5 franchise players and they're all at the top, then they would be very, very advised to tank right now because there is a way to guarantee yourself a top 5 pick. You just have to be the worst team in the league to do it. But if they view this as like, okay, it's Cooper, then there's like a group of like 5 prospects that we really like, and then there's a group of like 7 prospects that we really like, then they could view this in a tiered perspective of let's try to get as close to a bottom 5 finish as possible. Let's control what we can control, and then let's just see where the cards fall. And maybe one of those second group prospects falls to us at 7 or 8. You know what I mean? If we fall in the draft. With the Raptors' luck, I mean, last year they fell from 16th to 19th. I am very, very happy with Jacoby Walter, but y'all realize who went number 18 and who went number 17? Dalton Connect, Tristan Da Silva. Those are the players who went right before Jacoby Walter. And those players have played a lot better than Jacoby so far. It is also worth noting that they are older than Jacoby as well, right? A lot of people wanted Kalel Ware. He almost fell to number 16 as well. So, you know, these slottings of like 1 to 2 to 3 places, they do matter. But, you know, when people say, I just think it's a top 3 pick, if we just get a top 3 pick, it's like, don't be so sure. It doesn't have to be a top 3 pick. Sometimes it could be like the 8th pick or the 7th pick. I mean, Derek Lively, what was he? Cason Wallace, what was he? Bilal Coulibaly, what was he? None of these guys are top 5 picks. They're all very good. The Raptors are great at scouting. You don't need to worry too much, right? Like if you were if you're the fan of a team that has a history of just doing poorly in the draft, or I think you might be worried, but I'm not worried. I'm not worried at all. I'm not worried that this front office is going to be super short-sighted and trade that pick away for nothing, or some veteran win now player. In fact, the only move that I have been super, super, super distressed with is the Jakob Poeltl trade, nearly 2 years ago at this point. That's the only move that has super distressed me. Other than that, I'm pretty okay with how the Raptors have run things for the last 2 years, and I remain very okay with what they're doing right now. I hope you are too, because why be miserable when you don't have to be, right? I don't care who it is, they need a top 5 pick. Yeah, see that stuff. Like you don't care who it is as long as it's a top 5 pick. What if that top 5 pick turns into Josh Jackson or Sheldon Williams? Now are you happy? What if that top 5 pick turns into Kwame Brown and something like that? Like this demarcation, this sort of like this cutoff of like 5. It's a top 5 pick, it's a top 3 pick, it's a top 10 pick, it's a lottery pick. It's like, bro, Giannis won how many MVPs as the 15th overall pick? Like, I don't have to keep going over this, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah, there you go. It's all good, man. People are trained to think this way, though. People are trained to think in feast or famine. It's all you get a top 5 pick or you win a championship. And if you're doing anything else but getting a top 5 pick and a championship, you're a bust. But it's like successful organizations actually do very, very well managing those margins, managing those little victories throughout, right? It's about hitting that Portland pick. I mean, I would be, it would be disingenuous to say I'm just as invested in that Portland pick as I am in our own pick. But I really think there's going to be a serviceable rotation player available with that Portland pick. And with how well the Raptors are at drafting and developing players at this point, I think you need some high end talent to come in the door, right? There. You guys are hilarious. That's great. All right. I'm going to talk to y'all later. Enjoy the games. And yeah, go Pistons. The further the Pistons rise up, oh my God, the Pistons are blowing out the Minnesota Timberwolves. I did not see this coming. They're up by 19. Yikes. That is crazy. And Cade Cunningham has 30 points. Anthony Edwards has 38 points. Julius Randle has 4. Yo, what the hell are the yikes? Okay, I'm gonna talk to y'all later. And yes, I did want to cover the Raptors 905 game from last night. And unfortunately, I was unable to watch it. I went to YouTube to watch it, and it said the content owner doesn't allow this in your area. So I clipped as much as I could of Ulrich's highlights, and yeah, he looked really, really impressive. So there's a reel of some of his highlights if you haven't watched it over on our Instagram story and on Twitter/X. All right, talk to y'all later. And John, always with the facts. Hit the likes, folks. Hit the like, folks. All right, talk to y'all later. Bye.